All right, hello once again. Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I am creating a series of video presentations based off of the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. We're in accessibility, and we're about halfway through, and we're now talking about CSS and JavaScript accessibility first practice, or best practices. And as it says, for JavaScript and CSS, when used properly, also have the ability to allow for accessible web experience, or if misused, harm. So that's what this document talks about. CSS and JavaScript don't have the same immediate importance for accessibility as HTML. In other words, there are no semantic CSS tags, I don't believe, or JavaScript tags, but they still can help or hurt a person who has any kind of an impairment their experience with a website. So as it says, it's important that you consider some best practice advice to make sure that your use of CSS and or JavaScript doesn't ruin it. So they start with CSS. It's possible to use CSS to make any HTML element look like anything you want to, but that's not necessarily something you should do. Again, an example was one we gave before as far as taking a hyperlink and making it look like a button. All right. So it says, as an example, a screen reader can't navigate a page via heading elements if the developer hasn't appropriately used heading elements to mark up the document. By the same token, a heading loses its visual purpose if you style it so it doesn't look like a heading. The rule of thumb is that you can update the styling of a page to fit in your design, but don't change it so much that it basically doesn't look like the way it's been intended to be used. All right. So headings, paragraphs, lists, as it says, they give you an example here, and then they give you some styling. So what do they say here? You should select sensible font sizes, line heights, letter spacing. You should make sure that your headings stand out from your body text. Your text color should contrast well with your background color. I may have mentioned this, but probably not in here. There is a gentleman who has actually made quite a bit of money, to my knowledge, that he has written books, and he's got a website that's called websitesthatsuck.com. And notice, it looks like maybe it hasn't even been updated for a while because it's got 2015, 2014, etc. So I'm not sure if it's really been updated or not. All right, sorry about that. I had to pause for a few minutes. And I wanted to show you this. This is Websites That Suck. And it looks like it hasn't been active in at least a while. I know that, again, the guy had a book. It says our 21st year. The point is this. There are a lot of bad-looking websites out there. Well, how to build an SEO website that doesn't suck. Here it is. Or, oh, it's web pages that suck. Maybe that's it. I thought it was websites, though. Well, they both go to the same thing. The point, again, is this, that there are a lot of really bad-looking pages out there. There's a lot of really bad-looking websites out there. I remember going out to a site for a cigar company, and the background of the website was actually cigar paper. Well, if you think about it, the color of cigar paper is the same color as basically as feces. And it looked terrible. And they had brown writing on it. Now, it didn't stay up for long. They went back and fixed it. But that's just an example. All right? All right. You will rarely need to style emphasis elements in a significant way. I'd agree with that. Hold on a sec. All right, I thought the sound on the television was muted, but it was not. Okay, the standard conventions for bold and italicized text are pretty recognizable, and you probably won't have to change them much. I'd agree with that. The recognized styling for convention for abbreviations is a dotted underline. Was not aware of that. Okay, there's some link styling. And again, notice they have changed the color. So the regular color of links is now going to be red. All right. The hover, visited, and focus are going to be, I guess, a lighter red. And active will be black. All right. And you can do whatever you want to do with this stuff. And again, that should all make sense. All right. And sometimes what you don't want to do is make something, if you can help it, look or appear different than it would look or appear by default. All right. It says you can see some good CSS in their form.css. So there's a bunch of it in here. Let's take a look at the example. Well, I don't know if you'd call that some good CSS or not. Most of the CSS you'll write for forms will be for sizing elements, lining up. Again, it's for aesthetic reasons, to try to make things look, all right, symmetrical or whatever you want to say. You shouldn't or typically won't deviate too much from what you'd get by default. All right. Just make sure for tables you use them to present tabular data. You don't use them for anything else. Again, you were already introduced to this in the past. Many people created their websites as a series of, every page on there was a series of tables. You don't want to do that. All right. When choosing a color scheme for the website, make sure your colors between your background and your text contrast well. All right, it says your design might look cool, but if people with visual impairments like color blindness can't read it, you're kind of out of luck. Notice that there's a WebAIM color contrast checker that you can use, and there's other things that you can use too. All right, you can even just Google basically something like website color combo or something like that, and you can find things like that. All right. There are many instances where a visual design will require that not all the content is shown at once. Well, there's an example here. All right. Here we're using a tabular structure. So this is tab 1. If we click here, and if it was active, this would be changed probably to the second tab with different text, and the third tab with, again, different text. All right. Except that users can override styles. It is possible for users to override your styles with their own custom styles. And they give you a couple of examples here. And notice, users might do this for a variety of reasons. A visually impaired user might want to make the text bigger on all websites they visit. I know I may have said this before, I don't remember. But years ago, when I was teaching at a technical college in Wisconsin, I had a student who was legally blind. His name was Steve something or other, just a very, very intelligent young man. And I was talking with him one day, and I said, Steve, how much of your site do you have? And he said, it's gone down during the years. I got about 25%. He had probably, I'm going to guess, because he brought it in with him, about a 36-inch monitor. And he used a really big font size. All right, at least I'd say 55 or 75 pixels for just about everything. That would be a reason for him to override styles. All right. All right. JavaScript can also break depending on how it's used. Modern JavaScript is a powerful language. It's more and more powerful. It's being used more and more. All right. Use the right element for the right job. We talked about this earlier. Make sure the content is available as text, all right, or an alternative. It says earlier we looked at an example of how to use JavaScript to build in functionality where it's missing. This is not ideal. Really, you should use the right element for the right job. It's the old joke of, you know, when you've got a I don't even know what the saying is now, but the point is, use the right tool for the right job. If you're pounding in a nail, you want to use a hammer. You don't want to use a screwdriver type of an idea. All right. And as they mentioned there, complex functionality such as 3D games are not so easy to make accessible for others. So it might take some work if it's even possible. The problem often comes, as it says, when people, for lack of better words, get infatuated with JavaScript and use it for everything. Sometimes, as it says, you'll see a website where everything is done with JavaScript. The HTML was generated with JavaScript. The CSS was generated with JavaScript. I can't think of a reason for doing that, unless you were given it as an assignment, and I'd never do that. So you should keep unobtrusive JavaScript in mind when creating your content. Again, the idea of this, we talked about it earlier, is that it should be used wherever possible to enhance functionality, not build it in its entirety. A couple of good examples they give here: providing client-side form validation. We'll go through an example of that. And providing custom controls for HTML5 video and audio. We've looked at an example of that earlier. It says, as an example, we've written a quick, down and dirty little form validation. So notice, there you go. So if I come in here, all right, how about if I put in the letter E, and we get the built-in validation for please enter a number. How about, so it didn't check that. So in other words, I shouldn't be able to put in 1111 for a name, but it's letting me. All right, so there's some JavaScript in there, probably could be enhanced. Other JavaScript accessibility concerns as we bring this one to an end here. It says there are other things to be aware of when implementing JavaScript and thinking about accessibility. Mouse-specific events. Most user interactions are implemented in client-side JavaScript using event handlers, quite often clicking a button. Some events can have accessibility issues. It says the main example you'll come across is mouse-specific events like mouse over, mouse out, etc. All right, to mitigate these problems you might have, it says you should double up these events with similar events that can be activated by other means, focus and blur as an example. And that's pretty much it. So we're now have done these three, and I think 4 because we did the intro, and we've got 4 left if I'm right here. So next will be WAI-ARIA basics. Be back with that shortly.